Hi everyone. Hopefully you can all hear me and see me. Welcome to this Net Zero Carbon for Infrastructure discussion session. My name is Ian Cable. I'm one of the directors of the Collective Climate Action for the Cross-Government Climate Hub. Any of you who've joined through that route, thanks very much for already being members. But any of you who joined through any other routes, please do join us. We are certainly the widest cross-government climate community online in the UK, and obviously we think we're the best. But one of the key things we do is we promote the work of others. So that's what we're doing today. But also, we want people to join the community to share their thoughts, their ideas, their work. And also the key thing is for them to share their questions. We've made this commitment where we are going to make sure that every question in the community is answered to the satisfaction of the person who asked that question. So if you post something on there, we'll find someone or we'll find the right information for you to go away satisfied and hopefully catalyze your the work that you're doing. I'll post a link in the chat so that anyone can join who wants to if they aren't already members. But just moving on to the session now. This is a discussion session, so it's going to be half an hour to start with, where Tom and Natasha are going to talk about their work, and then we want to hear about your experiences as well. But Natasha is the Programme and Transformation Manager for the Net Zero Carbon for Infrastructure Programme at the Environment Agency, and Tom Goddard is the Net Zero Senior Specialist within the Sustainable Business Team. He leads on the EA and Corporate Net Zero and climate adaptation targets and standards, and he contributes to the wider sustainability strategy for the Environment Agency too. And they're going to talk to us about their respective experiences in the work for reaching net zero or decarbonising infrastructure. But they also want to know about what your experiences are. So have a think while they're talking and think about what you'd like to share. And any questions you can post them in the chat, and we can come to those in the second half of the session. So I'm going to pass over now to Tom, who's going to start off, and I'm going to shut up. Tom.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ian. And can I have the next slide, please, Ollie? Oh, and the next one, please. Fantastic. Thank you. As Ian kindly introduced me, I'm Tom Goddard. I'm the Net Zero Senior Specialist within the Environment Agency's Sustainable Business Team. I'm based in Tevilgate House in Worthing, which we cohabit with HMRC, Defra, Natural England and the Forestry Commission. And behind me, this is Worthing Pier, Pier of the Year in 2019, so worth a visit. I'll be providing a little bit of background on our corporate sustainability, our net zero targets and net zero performance prior to handing over to Tash. Next slide, please. So to start off with, I'll talk a little bit about who my team are. Sustainable business are a mostly inward-facing part of the EA who look to ensure that we carry out all of our work, whether that be regulation, building flood defences or instant response, in the most sustainable way we can. We sit within CNS, which is Corporate and National Services, in STA, which is the Strategy, Transformation and Assurance Directorate. There are acronyms galore. The Sustainable Business Team is then split again into 3 teams covering nature gain, compliance and learning, another with social equity, engagement and local operations. Then finally, the team I'm in, which is net zero, circular economy, data and reporting. In total, there's about 35 of us. Next slide, please. So the EA have just published our new corporate strategy, EA 2030. In this, we set out how we're going to deliver healthy air, land and water, whilst also supporting nature's recovery and sustainable growth, and how we can help build a nation resilient to climate change. Informing and supporting this, we have our sustainability strategy, which is called eMission 2030. This sets the standard for how we want to conduct our duties and carry out our work sustainably, and is split into the 4 themes you can see here. We have supporting nature recovery, contributing to an equitable society, transitioning to a circular economy, and responding to climate change. This final theme is where our net zero targets sit, and I can take you through these now. Next slide, please. We have a net zero target of 2045 to 2050, aiming to reach net zero slightly ahead of the legally binding government target of 2050. The reason for the range is to allow us a bit more flexibility with the date to move it forward as innovation in decarbonisation continues. To reach net zero, we must reduce our absolute emissions by at least 90% from our 2019-2020 baseline year, with the remainder offset by UK nature-based carbon removals. This is aligned with the SBTI definition of net zero, which is considered the global benchmark. We also have the challenging interim or milestone targets of a 45% reduction in emissions by 2030, an 80% reduction in our Scope 1 and 2 emissions by 2030, and to have a zero emitting fleet of cars and vans by 2027 and 4x4s by 2030. These are also supporting and contributing towards the greening government commitments. Next slide, please. Last year, we had an emissions total of just over 260,000 tonnes, which is actually over our budget and resulted in an amber RAG rating on our corporate scorecard. In the pie chart on the left, you can see the proportion of our emissions that sit within scopes 1, 2 and 3. So scope 1 is our direct emissions. So this is from things like the fuel burned in our fleet vehicles and gas heating in our buildings. Scope 2 is our indirect emissions, so from energy. These are the emissions from the power stations that generate the electricity for our offices, depots and assets. And then Scope 3, which dominates our footprint, as it does with most people. And this is all the other indirect emissions. So this includes emissions from the suppliers constructing our flood assets, business travel, in non-agency vehicles, waste disposal, and emissions from making and transporting all the things that we buy. From the chart on the right, you can see that construction is by far the biggest contributor to our emissions, sitting at about 62% last year. Next slide, please. Thanks. Here we have a screenshot of our corporate carbon dashboard. This has been designed as a tool to help areas achieve our net zero targets by providing data and identifying emissions hotspots. It allows areas and teams to monitor the emissions associated with their work and make the necessary adjustments to stay within their carbon budgets. Really, it can be used like the dash on a car. So if you see a red warning light, you know you need to go and investigate. Next slide, please, Ollie. Right, my final slide. This graph is showing our performance in terms of absolute emissions since the baseline year and forecast through to our 2030 target and then on to when we aim to reach net zero. You can see that we reached our peak in emissions in 2023, slightly ahead of when our forecast predicted that we'd be budgeted to peak. Unfortunately, we've remained stubbornly above our baseline emissions, despite doing some fantastic work in reducing our carbon intensity. Carbon intensity is the emissions per pound spent. The reason for this is that with a rapidly changing climate, we're having to build more flood defences. Our challenge now is to decouple the link between spending or building more and emitting more greenhouse gases. To do this, we'll need to work in a new way with new materials and embracing practices like natural flood management and nature-based solutions. It's a challenge that we're doing in collaboration with many of our colleagues across the EA, but also other stakeholders and especially with our supply chain. I'll now hand over to Dash, who's one of those leading on this challenge. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Tom. So hello, everybody. I've had a great introduction from both Ian and Tom. Thank you. So I lead the Net Zero Carbon for Infrastructure programme as the Programme and Transformation Manager. And I'm going to talk a little bit today around how this programme came into being and how we built the foundations of what we've decided to be able to bring transformational change to and in what sequence. Can I have the next slide, please? So as Tom already shared with you, the pie chart representing the carbon emissions of the organisation, as you saw, construction takes a huge amount of that footprint. And actually, the combination of both pumping and construction is to around 65% of the Environment Agency's total emissions. And we currently sit at around half of the Defra family emissions. So just a small part of that pie chart. Adaptation and resilience remain the Environment Agency's primary mandate and our unwavering commitment. And it is right that we recognise that over the last few years, our construction programme doubled in size between 2019 and 2023. And obviously with that came a doubling at least of our carbon footprint, as Tom already mentioned. And so it's absolutely essential that we bring decarbonisation into our efforts so that we can adapt and not make the climate problem even worse. We have a responsibility to ensure that all our flood defence and current and future perform well for their intended lifespan and beyond. And this can only be done if we climate proof our assets, whilst also minimising our contribution to further climate impact. So quite obviously, this is a complex challenge. There are construction and operational risks and those relating to the organisation's capacity to change. However, in face of that sort of adversity of challenge, I still like to be able to point out that when I used this slide, when we presented it a year ago, that figure was 73%. So we have made some good inroads into our footprint, but as Tom says, we still have much further that we need to go. Next slide, please. So what is the Net Zero Carbon for Infrastructure programme? The programme was stood up in response to the Environment Agency publicly committing to those goals that Tom shared. And this is a programme of transformation. This is not continuous improvement. It is to bring about a fast-paced change that would not be happening anyway. And it's to create that enabling culture for us to be able to change the way that we do things in a rapid way to give us that so necessary carbon reduction across our infrastructure assets by that 2030 goal and beyond. And when we devised the programme, we took a really in-depth look at where the organisation was at the time, which was around sort of 2 years ago, and where we needed to be at 2030, and took a deep dive to really understand what the activity needed to be able to close that gap so that we could change our organisation to one that brought carbon into the heart of all of our decision making. And when we took that deep dive and when we took that understanding, we used expert carbon specialists, we used people within our own organisation, industry and technical leads and senior users, and also those that wrote the PAS 2080 framework, and also those working at Cambridge University with the Carbon Code to help us understand all of the different elements that we need to take action on to be able to take us to net zero. So what you see on the right hand side of that slide is our kind of model, and it's based on areas of intervention. And so the top wraparound piece there you see is leadership. We recognise that we need to take demonstrative action in presenting ourselves as a leader of wanting to reach net zero, and what did that mean within industry, and ensuring that policy for now and for the future was fit for purpose. So inspiring our internal leadership, but also wider beyond into government, and really setting that future for us. We also have an intervention around our target setting and baseline assessments. At the time of 2 years ago, we were quite immature in terms of understanding what was our actual carbon position. How could we track where we were making interventions and where was that bringing us carbon reduction? So we've had to develop a suite of processes and tools and dashboards, as Tom showed you, to be able to understand what is our baseline and how can we track that over time to ensuring that we're putting the effort into the right places. Coupled with that, we also have supply chain engagements. So of that good sort of 60% that we showed you, a good proportion of that, well over 50% is actually locked into our value chain. As the Environment Agency has delivery partners, we need to make sure that our value system is well matched with that of our delivery partners, so that we are bringing that carbon conscious and carbon betterment approach into everything we do side by side as peers, and sharing those learned, building the communities of practices, and making sure where we are advancing things such as low carbon technology, that we're doing that as a collaborative effort and making sure that we have those risk sharing mechanisms in place so that we can advance at a pace that is different to business as usual. We also recognise that actually we need to be able to create strategy that gives us the licence to transform. And we've recently at the Environment Agency released our new EA 2030 strategy, and that speaks to our response to wanting to mature our nature recovery, encourage that natural capital and mitigate against climate crisis. And that gives programmes like myself and other sister change programmes in the organisation the ability to make sure that the organisation is transforming to match the times that we live in. And last but definitely not least, that bottom wraparound piece of intervention, which is around our people and culture, and making sure that we had dedicated effort to understand what our people inside the organisation needed to be able to enact new roles, new capabilities, and what did that mean for our culture as a wider organisation to bring carbon into the heart of our decision making in the same way that we do for our health and safety and well-being, and the same way that we might allocate financial allocations. So a lot goes into each of those particular interventions, And with the likes of very clever economic specialists, they modelled for us that actually a combination of all these different interventions and making action against these is what gave us the greatest probability of us reaching net zero as an organisation. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Now, by trade, I'm a transformational specialist. I'm not a carbon specialist. And so understanding something like net zero and the complexity of the challenge to transform means that we need to change the way that we do things, the way that we think, and the way that we have a culture as an organisation and cultures with our supply chain. And I spoke a couple of times there about integrating carbon into all of our decision making. And so that's just almost the technical elements that I spoke to in terms of making intervention across leadership, supply chain, target setting, evidence gathering, making sure our strategic conditions are right. But actually, it's really important that we are enabled as individuals to enact different behaviours in our future that match where we're going. And so the programme is overlaid with this particular model, which is a COM-B model, which is a behaviour change piece, which speaks to 3 particular elements that need to be combined to be able to achieve a new behaviour. And those 3 elements are capability, motivation and opportunity. And so it's important that we took action to be able to build the right skills and the right abilities within our target operating model at the Environment Agency to make sure that actually we could have the right talents there to be able to lean on in our future. We also felt that we needed to put that dedicated effort into ensuring that we have the right commitment and the belief to do this from ground up, right through to our sponsoring coalitions of our governance and our directors. And we undertook studies around the time of designing this programme that actually 93% of our people were happy to have their roles changed or adapted in some way to be able to support the Environment Agency reaching its net zero goals. And lastly, but again, not least, is having the right opportunity to be able to exercise those new behaviours. So making sure that whenever we're bringing these transformational changes in, that we have the right tools and the right resources in the right place at the right time, and making sure that we do actually have the right people around us to help us achieve this challenge. And that stems from building a programme like ours, which rests on both ProSci change methodology and MSP programme methodology, as well as making sure that the target operating model in the organisation is adapting to be able to bring in carbon specialist roles where necessary to support us in our new behaviours. So that's a little bit of an understanding about how we built our programme and the sort of things that went into that melting pot, if you will, to be able to achieve inroads into these big targets. So if I can have the next slide, please. So a summary of where we've been, getting that detailed understanding, integrating that project and change management delivery and taking that multi-vention approach. We understand that also at the organisation that we are, the Environment Agency, we have to be pivotal in industry about the way that we're approaching this particular piece and expediting the way that we do our engineering and that we are risk-taking with our supply partners to be able to try things that aren't being tried and tested elsewhere. And all of that together is creating that enabling environment to be able to transform something new. And now I want to talk a little bit about, so what did that get us? So in terms of building a programme in this manner with that concept and that thought process, I'm going to talk a little more about the outcomes of what we've delivered so far. So can I have the next slide, please? We began by designing a whole life carbon management system around our capital programme. And our capital programme is obviously not insignificant. And we often say that our director, John Russon, who owns that particular resilience programme for the country and also owns the largest part of the footprint, he has the hardest job in net zero because it is significant, the footprint that is associated with our capital schemes. So for the last few years, we have spent a huge amount of time sitting with those programming teams and looking at what was already in flight, already in delivery, the ground already dug, and what was coming through the pipeline, and being able to bring in a carbon management system around that capital programme so that we could monitor the carbon that is being spent and that we could bring that in line with a adjusted and accepted glide path that will take us to net zero. We've also been working hard with bringing in new innovations, low carbon technologies, to make sure that we are accelerating the standards of that modern method of engineering, and being able to advance such initiatives such as the low carbon concrete route map that was hosted within the Environment Agency Technical Authority a few years ago, which has now amended all of our minimum technical requirements. We haven't stopped there. It's also important to us that while we talk about carbon reduction, we also recognise that the Science Based Target Initiative sets a standard of a 90% reduction and a 10% carbon offset as what actually equates to net zero. And so we work with Tom and his team to be able to support that 10% of carbon offsetting. And we have created a monitoring and verification and reporting tool, which actually measures the carbon that is sequestrated through our natural flood management schemes, so that we can keep our eye on the carbon that is being removed through those natural resilience methods. We've also changed our contractual arrangements. So as I mentioned, a lot of our delivery comes from those delivery partners on our frameworks. And so it's really important that when we're trying to keep that whole carbon management process together around our capital programme, that we do have that live data to be able to rest on, that really gives us a true picture of where we are with our carbon budgets against delivery. And so being able to make that now a mandatory monthly carbon contractual arrangement has been pioneering, and means that we do ensure that we can get that good quality data to make our decisions from. And as I mentioned earlier as well, that people and culture piece is so important for us to be able to change our target operating model for the organisation and make sure that we have got some permanency in that skills and capability. So there is an offer both at a national and an area level to provide a supporting network so that carbon in decision making can be as effective as possible. All the time understanding that we are sitting in a moving environment. Our governments change, and we as an organisation still have the responsibility to decarbonise. And so we're building an evidence base to make sure that we can really understand what data there is out there already, so that we can make the most of our investments to really bring about sustainable business. And that's not all. So if I can have the next slide, please. The last couple of years have been busy for the programme. And so here's more of what this programme has delivered. So we also are very proud to track the flood risk management projects and how they actually avoid carbon. It's really key that although this doesn't contribute to our net zero carbon measures, we do recognise as an organisation that providing that flood resilience, whilst we're actually feeling the effect of climate emergency, means that we can take a really good look at the carbon that is avoided by having those knock-on hard structures offered to the country and our natural flood management schemes to give that resilience, and that we track the carbon avoided to those, so the effects of having houses not having to be rebuilt or reupholstered, recarpeted, new TVs and sofas ordered, because we have protected them against that flooding. We've also developed risk sharing mechanisms with our supply chain to make sure that we are going to take that step forward together to really understand how we can use those low carbon technologies, be that concrete, be that a solar energy, be that a beyond either of those things, and make sure that actually we're doing that as a collective. And making sure that anything that we do learn is shared. And that's exactly why we're here today, and absolutely echoes the ethos of this group, being able to share what we know and what we know doesn't work. So I think that's a really important part of our journey in transformation, is falling forward and sharing that actually where some of these materials, these innovations or tried and tested behaviours aren't working for us, so that we can expedite others' journeys. And I always say this, the net zero carbon goals for us all and mitigating climate crisis is not just the Environment Agency's problem, it's all of our problem. So we all need to be in this together to make sure that we've got that community of practice. We've also been working hard to really influence our future, to make sure that actually programmes like this and the work of the Sustainable Business team, where Tom and his team sit, and others in the organisation are working hard to align with academia and make sure that our future generations are building their careers and their technical specialist knowledge on what we need to be able to sustain the changes we are making now and inspiring those new careers in sustainability. So we are partnered with some northern universities at the moment, and particularly Constructing Change Initiative, which is seeking to bring more females into that construction industry to make sure that we have got that really diverse and inclusive approach to the way that we mitigate against climate crisis. They're just a few of the things that we have been dealing with over the last couple of years and a few of the successful outputs we've had as a programme. But also to not pay too much attention, but we're going to give another slide now, which really just shows a graph that takes an approach, which is we've got tactical intervention, which is the stuff around bringing in contractual arrangements and getting that carbon reporting. But we also need to couple that with those strategic interventions, making sure that our operating environment is right for us. And that graph, that sort of smaller picture there, just shows that actually you need all of that to be able to go as far as you need to go to radically decarbonise. We've also unlocked some wider benefits. So it's all good talking about some of the carbon reduction benefits, but something that we are really proud of as well is that we are bringing benefits to other sectors. So carbon and carbon reduction is sector agnostic. So to be able to bring benefits to procurement and paving the way for climate contracting, we've won awards for that. We're also award winning in the way that we've integrated this people-centric delivery model alongside project management disciplines. And all of that is to benefit our communities and ensure that we really are mitigating climate crisis and doing it from that data and evidence-led position. So quite a bit that we've delivered over the last couple of years and more still to go. So I'm just going to talk very briefly and then we'll open up to some questions. So the next slide, please, is just to give a bit of a flavour about the sort of roles that we've brought into our organisation to give us that permanent future proofing for those reductions that we're bringing about. We've now got experts sat inside the organisation to support us with our carbon management processes and carbon assessment tools, which are new, making sure that we have got that local and national area of support. And we also have a really specialist team there to verify those carbon assessments that are coming back from our supply chain and from our delivery schemes to make sure that actually our carbon accounting is as robust as it can be. And that is still very much an emerging field. And my final slide, please. Thank you. So what's next for us? I've talked a lot about what we've already delivered, but if we're looking forward to what's coming next for the organisation and for us as a programme, we deliver pilots and trials to be able to invest in those new and novel carbon technologies so that we can take what works and we can pass it through to our sister change programme called the Technology Accelerator Programme, which seeks to take technologies that have been proven and then use them at scale with our delivery partners to see what else we can achieve for that method of engineering. We're going to take the learns of what we've been doing around trying to decarbonise and bring a whole life carbon management process to our construction programme and take that across to operations and maintenance and build ourselves a roadmap this year of how we're going to decarbonise all of the activity that is attached to maintaining our asset health. We're going to continue embedding carbon into future strategy and working really hard to influence the new spending review. We need to continuously update our digital systems. As an organisation, our enterprise systems weren't quite fit for purpose. We needed to be able to bring in some pretty hefty changes digitally to house all of this carbon data as a warehouse so that we can use it to make automated decisions and bring that carbon into our decision making more easily. And last but not least, because I'm a transformation change manager at heart, like I said, continuing to create that enabling culture for change and really deploying both a programme management and a change management approach to all of our changes to ensure that we have really brigaded the coalitions of people that are so necessary to bring about that absolute behaviour change to sustain a low carbon environment. Thanks ever so much. I think we'll open up to questions now.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, if you have any experiences that you want to share, just put your hand up and we can, unmute you and put your camera on as well if you want to share your, your footage as well. But if there's anything you want to say that you don't want shared, then we can happily edit this out. Like we'll be promoting it, like sharing this on YouTube, so we can edit any video and we don't have to release the whole thing. So yeah, don't hold back on any experiences you might have or any questions that you think might be contentious. We want to try and promote as much conversation as possible. But my thoughts really quickly, I think one of the things you highlighted, the sharing of failures, I think that's like hugely important. And I think there's a saying, write your successes in stone and your failures in sand. And I I think that's something that we try and promote in the Cross Government Climate Hub, is to share what goes wrong as much as possible, because I think there's a huge amount to be learned there. And also, it promotes that idea of, it's okay to try and to fail and to try new things. So yeah, I thought that was a really important thing that you mentioned.